Hello from VSBA, monitoring legislation that affects school boards across the state. Be sure to watch for legislative alerts in your email asking for your help with action items during the legislative session. Returning from town meeting break, legislators worked last week to advance policy bills addressing several topics that will affect education. H106, known as the Community Schools Act, passed out of committee favorably and was referred to House Appropriations. This bill, which would take effect upon passage, would provide a grant program for the implementation of community schools programs, providing students with equitable access to a high-quality education at a public school that includes integrated student supports, expanded and enriched learning time and opportunities, active family and community engagement, and collaborative leadership and practices. An eligible school would be a public school or supervisory union with a student body where 40% of students or more are eligible for free reduced lunch, or if the school has been identified for comprehensive or equity support and intervention under ESEA or otherwise identified by the state as being in need of additional support. Provisions in the bill include annual demonstration grants of up to $110,000 per year for a period of 3 years to hire a community school coordinator to develop and implement a program or to augment work already being performed to develop and implement community school program. Technical assistance from the Agency of Education to eligible applicants to advise these applicants of other potential sources of funding and to evaluate the program. And an appropriation of just over $1.5 million from the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. H91 would suspend implementation of the statewide finance and financial data management system pending a review of its functionality by the statewide finance and financial data management system advisory group, which would include school business managers and further legislative action to reinstate its implementation. Last week, the House Education Committee heard testimony from several school district business officials, as well as from the IT consultant for Joint Fiscal Office. Chair Webb suggested that time was running short to progress the bill. However, some of the language may be inserted into another bill. S100 would provide universal school meals by requiring every public school to provide free breakfast and lunch to all students. This would take effect on July 1st, 2021. The bill also creates incentives for schools to purchase locally produced foods. The cost of meals that are not reimbursed through federal or state funds would be borne to school districts. The AOE has testified to the complexity and interrelatedness of free and reduced lunch data with many other areas of education at the state and federal level, and recommended that the committee take testimony at a minimum from the Vermont Superintendents Association, the Vermont Principals Association, and the Vermont School Boards Association. This bill has an appropriation from the general fund for a staff person to administer the school food program. JFO provided a fiscal note with cost estimates to fulfill the new obligations at a range of $24 to $40 million annually. Joint testimony from VSA, VSBA, and BPA was provided in the Senate Education Committee on Friday. The testimony stressed the importance of feeding children and that schools are already heavily engaged in providing universal meals. The method currently proposed in S100, having school districts budget those costs on a district-by-district basis, is not an efficient, transparent, or equitable way to pay for this program. Recommendations included a funding method via a state appropriation if universal meals are a state policy and program designed for efficiency, to reduce requirements on school business offices' data collection through the current administration of school meals programs, which is important to local districts and the state for a variety of reasons. Both the Senate and the House Education Committees have passed literacy bills out of committee. The Senate bill, S114, proposes a grant program which includes $3 million of federally appropriated funds, whereas the bill developed in the House, H101, appropriates $2 million and states that if this appropriation is insufficient to fully fund the grants, then the grant amounts that are awarded would be prorated. Both bills would support SUs in providing professional development and methods of teaching literacy, create the position of a statewide literacy coordinator at the AOE, and amend 16 VSA 2903 to create a literacy advisory council, which would advise the AOE, the state board, and the General Assembly on improving literacy instruction and outcomes in the state. The bill would also require review of teacher preparation programs and licensing and relicensing criteria. S-114 was taken up by Senate Appropriations on Friday, and the committee discussed moving the language of the grant program into a bill H-315, which is a COVID recovery bill. The committee asked Legislative Council for an amendment, which it will review this week. H-101 was referred to House Appropriation, where it was taken up on Friday and will continue to be taken up this week. Senate Education passed S-13, a bill addressing the waiting study, out of committee. The bill creates a 6-member task force on the implementation of the Pupil Waiting Factors Report, and this task force would collaborate with the Vermont Superintendents Association, the Vermont School Boards Association, the Vermont Council of Special Education Administrators, the Vermont Principals Association, and the Vermont National Education Association. The task force would receive administrative support from the AOE, technical support from JFO, and legal support from the Office of Legislative Counsel. It would also hold at least one meeting to share information and receive input from the public concerning this work. The bill includes an appropriation from the general fund for the task force to retain a consultant who would have expertise and experience in providing advice on Vermont's education funding and tax system, and would be nationally recognized in the field of education funding and tax systems. A report to the General Assembly would include an action plan and proposed legislation to ensure that all public school students have equitable access to educational opportunities. The Senate Education Committee heard testimony from Sue Siglowski, Jeff Francis, and Jay Nichols, conveying strong support for the findings of the report and thoughtful and expeditious implementation plan. Regarding S-16, a bill that would create a school discipline advisory council, which would be charged with making recommendations to end suspension and expulsions for all but the most serious student behaviors, and recommend changes to the types of data collected and the data collection processes regarding suspensions and expulsions. This bill carries a small appropriations from the general fund for the task force and would take effect upon passage. The Senate Education Committee moved favorably on this bill last week. S-24 would prohibit the retail sale of flavored cigarettes, e-cigarettes, and e-liquids, and eliminate the existing ban on and penalty for possession of cigarettes, e-cigarettes, and tobacco paraphernalia by individuals under age 21. The bill would also direct the Office of the Attorney General to report on the extent to which Vermont may legally restrict advertising and regulate labels for e-cigarettes and other vaping-related products. This bill was committed to the Senate Economic Development Committee with a favorable report from the Committee on Health and Welfare last week. The Senate Miscellaneous Education Bill S-115 includes language from S-26, S-27, and S-32, which addressed libraries, cultural liaisons, and school wellness and menstrual products. Specifically, the bill creates a working group on the status of libraries in Vermont with the intent of strengthening and supporting libraries of all sizes and improving library services for the public. Amends 16 VSA 136 by requiring the Agency of Education in collaboration with the Advisory Council on Wellness and Comprehensive Health to update and distribute a model wellness program policy using an expanded definition of wellness program. Amends 16 VSA 4029, allowing education funds to be used by a school district and the town or city, municipality or municipalities in which the school district operates for services of cultural liaisons to support students and families who have limited English proficiency. And the bill amends 16 VSA 1432 by requiring the provision of menstrual products for students free of charge. In a fiscal note provided by JFO, estimates that the cost of providing menstrual products would be roughly $50,000 to $60,000 annually, and the cost of purchasing dispensers would range from $120,000 to $180,000. This would be one-time cost in 2022-23 school year, and the bill does not require that schools provide dispensers. This bill carries no appropriations. The school districts and approved independent schools would bear the cost, and the bill would take effect upon passage, except that the requirement of menstrual products provision for the 2022-2023 school year and then after. This week, Senate Education Committee will hear testimony from Joyce Manchester from Joint Fiscal Office and witnesses from the Vermont NEA regarding H81, the bill addressing statewide bargaining for public school employees' healthcare benefits. Thank you for listening.